This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Bombs kill at least 185 in Easter Day attacks in Sri Lankan churches and hotels. US President recognizes Haftar's role in fighting terrorism. And unidentified gunmen attack hospital at Ebola epicenter in DR Congo. Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is Africa Live and I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Also coming up in the programme. In business, South Africa explores scenarios to limit a negative impact from Brexit. And in sport, Tanzania Football Federation denies receiving bribes from CAF president. We begin in Sri Lanka, where multiple explosions have killed dozens of people. AFP reports the death toll is now standing at 185. That number is expected to rise. 3 churches and 3 hotels in and around the capital of Colombo were targeted almost simultaneously. 2 additional churches were also targeted outside the capital. Hundreds have been injured, some of them are foreigners, including 4 Chinese. Police have blocked off the areas as crews rushed the victims to hospitals. No group has claimed responsibility. Officials suspect suicide bombers are behind 2 of the church blasts. The government has declared a curfew. We'll continue to keep you updated as the story develops. In Libya, General Khalifa Haftar's troops continue their push towards Tripoli. Several airstrikes have hit suburbs of the capital city. A heavy explosion was reported on Sunday morning. Residents reported seeing an aircraft circling Tripoli for 10 minutes before the attack. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump spoke over the phone to General Haftar. In a release statement, the US recognized Haftar's role in fighting terrorism and securing Libya's oil resources. Well, the statement bolstered supporters of Haftar's offensive. The international community has been divided over how to handle the intense fighting, with the UN calling for a ceasefire. Well, CGTN's Guy Henderson has been following developments in Libya for us, and he now joins us live from Benghazi. Guy, a heavy explosion was heard on Sunday morning in the Libyan capital, Tripoli. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, the reports I've been hearing, Karen, are about an attack on Saturday in the base of Garian. Garian is one of the forward positions for Haftar's Libyan National Army, the Eastern forces that are carrying out this attack on Tripoli. We've spoken to the LNA about this. They say there were 5 airstrikes. They're blaming the government of national accord and the militias that are surrounding that government. They say there were no casualties. There's been a bit of an uptick in fighting in the last 24 hours or so after a few days of a bit of a lull. The UN was starting to call that lull a stalemate. But nonetheless, 220 casualties now, according to the United Nations. But the government of Fayez Sarraj appears now to be launching this counter-attack. Perhaps one possibility here is that with the LNA telling us in the last few days to expect huge changes, that's their words, in the positions of some of the close allies of the United States, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, in terms of the level of their support for General Haftar, given that Donald Trump, the US President, has had this conversation with General Haftar. You know, the LNA is reading that as adding legitimacy to the LNA's offensive against the UN-backed government. And so one possibility here, of course, is that the Sarraj government is launching this counter-offensive to try and make some gains while it still can.
Okay, Guy, I'm afraid we will have to leave it there. The line was not very good. Let's move on to another story now. Staying with Egypt, the United States is warning Egypt against purchasing Russian fighter jets. At a Senate budget hearing, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said that the US will impose sanctions should Egypt go through with the deal. Meanwhile, President Trump praised his Egyptian counterpart Abdel Fattah el-Sisi after the two met at a forum in Washington. CGTN's Yasser Hakim takes a closer look.
The Egyptian government has not responded to the US warning, although Egypt has also not formally announced any intention to buy Sukhoi 35 fighter jets from Russia. It retains the right to purchase weapons from any source.
Egypt is now open to trade with different countries. Before, it was only the US, but lately we've bought weapons from 13 countries. Therefore, the US or any other country don't have the right to dictate to Egypt where it can buy its weapons. A main source of trade revenue for the US comes from military sales. But Egypt's policy in the last 4 years has changed to diversify sources of weapons.
Fighting terrorism is a priority for Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi.
Egypt has been arming itself in the last few years because it's in a volatile region. To the west is Libya and Algeria. To the south is Sudan, and to the east is Syria and Palestine. These are volatile areas, and we have the right to defend ourselves without listening to any warnings from the US or other countries.
Experts say the US warning is not going to affect the strong ties with Egypt. Last week, US President Donald Trump described the relationship as the best it has ever been. Since taking office, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has been eager on maintaining good relations with both superpowers, unlike his predecessors, who have heavily relied on the US. Keeping a balanced approach between the US and Russia is the core of the foreign policy of Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, and the US warning, experts say, will not deter the president from changing his policy. Yas Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, besides the controversial presidential term, Egyptians are also voting in a referendum to further empower women. The constitutional changes will set women's representation in parliament at a minimum of 25%. But will this be enough to encourage women to vote? Our correspondent in Cairo, Adel El-Mahrouhi, finds out.
Since he took office, President el-Sisi has been encouraging women to take bigger roles in the country. He opened room to major women empowerment reform, and in this referendum, it was quite evident which segment of society was most keen to vote.
The ladies and the girls. They felt before from the previous elections that their role there is very important and their participation is very important, and this gives us more privileges and benefits. They participated already in the last 5 or 6 years ago, and they gained the fruits behind this. They were allowed to have higher positions and to show their abilities and show their success.
The constitutional changes will give women at least quarter of the parliament seats, but that, however, didn't seem to be the main incentive for their significant turnout.
It's good that the country is moving to a bigger role for women. However, what was more appealing is the stability and transition of power the Constitution provides. There will be a vice president, which means, under any circumstances, if the president is gone, there will be a peaceful transition of power. We've had our share of instability.
Women compose nearly half the voting population in Egypt. For years, they've been the voting force in the country, and it appears the trend continues in this referendum. Adel El-Mahrouhi, CGTN, Cairo.
Moving on to other news now. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, unidentified gunmen have attacked a hospital treating Ebola patients in the east of the country. The gunmen were fought off by Congolese police. The attack came a day after a doctor working with the World Health Organization was shot dead by militiamen in Butembo City. CGTN's Chris Ochumringa has more from Kinshasa.
The attack on Katwa Hospital was carried out by militants in the Ebola-affected city of Butembo. One local official says the assailants tried to burn down the hospital. One of the militants was killed and 4 others were arrested. The incident comes a day after a Cameroonian doctor working with the World Health Organization was shot dead by armed men at the Catholic University of Graben Hospital. Eyewitnesses reported hearing the attackers blaming foreigners for bringing Ebola to their region. Attacks by armed groups have been affecting efforts to contain the deadly disease. The Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, has condemned the killing of health workers. Officials from the Congolese Health Ministry have urged healthcare workers to continue treating patients until the disease is contained. 859 patients have died of Ebola since August last year. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Well, we are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including Northern Ugandan Centre looks to train victims of LRA war. And Senegalese female vulcanizer breaks through in male-dominated field.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm reporting from Nairobi's city center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's return to our top story now in Sri Lanka, where multiple explosions have killed dozens of people. AFP reports the death toll is now standing at 185. That number is expected to rise. 3 churches and 3 hotels in and around the capital of Colombo were targeted almost simultaneously. 2 additional churches were also targeted outside the capital. Hundreds have been injured. Some of them are foreigners, including 4 Chinese. Well, police have blocked off the areas as crews rush the victims to hospital. No group has claimed responsibility. Officials suspect suicide bombers are behind 2 of the church blasts. The government has declared a curfew. We'll continue to keep you updated as the story develops. Well, we are now joined on the phone by Rathindra Kurawita. He is the news editor of The Island in Sri Lanka. Thank you very much for joining us. What is the latest that you have on the series of attacks there?
Thank you. I mean, the situation in Sri Lanka is still developing. Within the last hour, there were 2 explosions inside a house in Colombo. And so far, as you said, we have declared curfew from 6 p.m. today to 6 a.m. tomorrow. Security has been increased throughout the island. And also Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe told media that he will inform the public whether an extremist religious group is involved in the attack. And he is also to meet the President, heads of security, to discuss what plans of action are going to be taken. From what we know, over 192 people have been killed and about 400 people have been injured.
So the figure has gone up to 192, as you say there. Do we know yet who is responsible?
So far the government has not said who's responsible, but there are various claims that religious and extremist religious organizations behind it, and the Prime Minister, and this question has been posed to the Prime Minister, and he said he'll look into the matter and reveal who's behind the attack soon. And we have also organized a special operations to coordinate all the investigations. Hopefully within the next 24 hours, the government officials will declare who's responsible.
Well, thank you very much. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us. Moving on to other news now. 20 years of civil war with the Lord's Resistance Army has left many people in northern Uganda with no skills or training to build a future. CGTN's Daniel Arap-Moy looks at efforts to help young men and women gain hands-on skills.
This is Gulu War-Affected Center, a place that has become a beacon of hope for hundreds of young men and women who were directly or indirectly affected by the LRA war. Jacqueline Ageno-Roch is one of the young women at the center. She proudly shares with us what she has achieved during our study here.
I learned many things. One, braiding, the one I'm doing, 3-3, they call it like that. The next thing, weaving, that you use needle, thread, and extension weave.
Many of these young men and women belong to a generation of youth who have missed out on school due to the devastating effects of the conflict north of Uganda. Some say they lost their parents, while others their siblings in the violence. Thousands others were forced into combat, child marriage or sexual exploitation, and remain haunted by the memories of the war. Charles Akera is a 22-year-old who was born in captivity following the abduction of his mother and father. Akera says his father was killed in the jungles of northern Uganda during the war. For now, he remains an orphan in need of assistance. Despite the fact that his father is long gone, Akera, just like many others here, has not totally lost hope. He has enrolled at the center to learn hairdressing with the hope of earning some little money in the near future to better himself.
After gaining skills here, I would love to continue with my education and acquire even better skills.
Without an education or vocational skills, they struggle to gain traction as they enter adulthood, despite being eager to move beyond the past. But many of these war-affected youths are not taking any chances, giving in their all to learn life skills for a brighter future. Gulu War-Affected Training Center is focusing on these youth with particular attention on girls, with the aim of improving their living conditions and increase their independence through education and training.
The Gulu War-Affected Training Center was set up to provide healing to hundreds of youths traumatized as a result of the war.
The center has expanded. It now covers as far as South Sudan, a country that also bore the brunt of the Lord's Resistance Army's violence.
These are people who have been affected by the war in Southern Sudan. So when they come here, we also train them on different skills.
For now, they continue to help not only the youth, but also women affected by the war, equipping them with hands-on skills like tailoring to help them earn a living. Daniel Arap-Moy, CGTN, Northern Uganda.
In Senegal, the vulcanizer profession is traditionally reserved for men. Vulcanizer Bateyrame Nadiaye, a 50-year-old woman, managed to break this taboo.
In her workshop located in Rufisque, a suburb of Senegalese capital Dakar, Arame Ndiaye repairs flat tires and pumps in air in the tires of trucks, motorcycles and bicycles with the assistance of her 6 apprentices. She has been doing this job with great passion for about 30 years.
It was my late husband who taught me this job. He himself was a vulcanizer. I began to practice vulcanization when I realized that my husband's income was not enough to cover all the expenses of the house. As a result, I decided to assist my husband and become his secretary to monitor the accounts of the workshop. Seeing my commitment, my late husband trained me in vulcanization. It all began there.
Her neighbors call her Taya Arame, but to her customers, she's the Iron Lady. At Taya Arame, the rates vary between $1 and $4 depending on the type of work done. Over the years, Arame has proven her skills and advanced knowledge in the field of vulcanization.
I have known Aram for 5 years. When I want to repair or inflate the tires of my car, I come to her workshop. Her work is rapid and satisfactory. I call her the Iron Lady because she competes with men.
I came to check if there's enough air in the tires of my vehicle. For a lady, doing this job is not really easy. Given her age and weight, she manages to be as good as a man. Her bravery and courage are to be commended.
A mother of 6, Taya Arame balances work and family life with the help of her oldest daughter. In her 30-year career, she has trained about 20 vulcanizers, and her ambition now is to modernize her workshop. Sadiq Shaban, CGTN.
The South Sudanese government says it's continuing preparations to form a unity government by next month. Opposition leader Riek Machar is calling for a delay to ensure additional security measures are put in place ahead of his return to the country. Machar and President Salva Kiir are scheduled to form a power-sharing government under a peace deal signed last September. CGTN's Patrick Hoyt now reports.
South Sudan's 7-month-old peace deal requires a new government representing all political groups to be formed in May. But former Vice President turned opposition leader Riek Machar is calling for a 6-month postponement in the formation of the new government, citing a lack of progress on security.
For this peace agreement to move forward, of course, there are some things like the security arrangement, in my own view, is something that need to be also addressed, because when you diffuse the tension of the forces on the ground, unify the forces, then it will be like they will have the confidence.
Machar left Juba in 2016 amid clashes between his supporters and those of President Salva Kiir. The current government says it has no intention of delaying the formation of a unity government aimed at ending 6 years of conflict. It's calling on Machar to return to Juba to help set up the power-sharing agreement.
Already, his deputy is here, the deputy of the SPLM-IO chairperson. That is the deputy of Dr. Riek Machar. And Dr. Riek Machar's wife is also here. A number of other stakeholders that signed the peace agreement are here. So there's no reason why Dr. Riek should not be in Juba.
There are some opposition groups that say the current government doesn't have the resources to reform the security sector, and the more there is delay in forming the new government, the more the South Sudanese people will lose momentum and trust in the implementation of the peace deal. And some opposition groups disagree with Machar's demand for a delay.
It's important that you form a government of interested parties, and the interested parties now take the responsibility to implement the remaining activities within the pre-transition period. Extending the pre-transition activities, the pre-transition is not healthy, neither to the country, neither to the peace.
More than 2 million South Sudanese people are living as refugees in the country's neighboring states as a result of the young nation's civil war. For them, the wait to return home continues amid the ongoing struggle to find a durable peace. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Still in South Sudan, where a dozen internally displaced persons have been relocated back to the country's Jonglei region. Thousands have spent years at a protection of civilians site in the capital, Juba, but now they may have a chance to go home. CGTN's Astatol reports.
3 sisters are leaving a UN protection camp in the capital, Juba. They're among a dozen displaced people who have chosen voluntarily to return home to South Sudan's Jonglei region. In 2013, South Sudan slid back into conflict, and millions were displaced internally or fled across the border to Kenya.
Life here is different from life in the village. Because here, nobody is helping you. But in the village, you have relatives around you, and they help you.
Many, including the 3 sisters, have been displaced more than once. They returned to South Sudan about a year ago from Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya.
When we were in Kenya, we were in Kakuma. We were in school, but we dropped out because the husband of our elder sister, who used to support us, no longer can because he is in detention. So we are happy to go back home and be reunified with our parents and continue with our education.
There are protection sites in 4 locations dotted across South Sudan. This is the first time this year that internally displaced persons are leaving the Juba protection site. UN agencies and the South Sudanese government are working together to ensure that relocations are safe, informed, and voluntary.
Mandate of the mission has been changed to emphasize that the mission should also support returns of IDPs to their homes of origin. We therefore are working with the Relief and Rehabilitation Commission of the government together with humanitarian actors to prepare an action plan.
The convoy will take 3 days to reach its destination. With a peace deal in place, hopefully more will be reunited with their families after years of separation. Astatal, CGTN.
Traffic authorities in South Africa say they are now introducing stringent laws to deal with the high accident death toll on the roads. CGTN's Yolisa Njumela has more.
Senior traffic authorities and traffic officials are out in full force this weekend. They have their hands full as motorists and their passengers make their way to different destinations. The volume of traffic going out of the economic hub, Gauteng province, has been steadily increasing, and the number of fatalities are also on the increase.
At this time of the year, thousands of people travel to their holiday destinations, their homes and places of worship. A number of others travel to neighboring countries such as Zimbabwe, Namibia and Zambia.
The Easter weekend actually is worse than the festive season because the festive season is 4 or 5 weeks. Here it's concentration. It's today, you know, thousands and thousands of vehicles are moving, and on Monday. But also this Easter, much as we are doing enforcement all round, we've particularly prioritized drunken driving, because that still remains one of the most serious causes of road crashes, injuries and fatalities on our road. There are still too many South African drivers who just think it's fine to get drunk and get onto the road as a driver, and we are clamping down on that now very seriously.
Nzimande says his ministry will now introduce strict laws to deal with the problem of drunken driving.
We are tightening the laws. It's very clear to me now, you know, a year after this portfolio, that actually, unless we tighten the laws, we are not going to fight successfully this case. Going to be making drunken driving a much more serious offense than it is now. Because if you get into your car drunk, we are as good as a murderer potentially, actually.
Motorists agree that they should be more responsible on the roads.
Don't drink and drive, and I've got a second driver. When I'm tired, she's gonna drive. Most of the time, most of the people, they just drive and while they are on based on the cell phone, so that they must stop such things, so that they will be safe.
No, it's just to comply to the rules of the road, and then just to stick to the rules of the road. And when I feel like I'm tired, I just have to have a rest. So that will be the best way for me to reach my destination.
Authorities will continue to be on high alert with several roadblocks in place to ensure that motorists obey the rules of the roads and arrive safely at their destinations. Yolisa Njumela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
Delegations from more than 60 countries are arriving in the Chinese coastal city of Qingdao to mark the 70th anniversary of China's Navy. Warships from Russia, Australia, Bangladesh, Brunei and Japan docked earlier today. Well, events begin on Monday and will last for almost the whole week, including a review on Tuesday of the Chinese and foreign fleets. CGTN's reporter Tang Bo has more from the scene.
The port of Qingdao is designed for civil and commercial purposes, where there are areas for passenger liners and container ships. To welcome the foreign navies, 4 of 5 container terminals here have been cleared and renovated. Today, in total, 16 foreign naval vessels will dock here, getting ready for the upcoming celebrations and the International Fleet Review, just like this one right next to me, Indian Navy guided missile destroyer Kolkata. Equipped with state-of-the-art weapons, the Indian destroyer has sensors to address threats in all dimensions of naval warfare. Its participation has been widely considered as part of the continuing efforts to step up bilateral military ties between China and India. Republic of Korea frigate Gyeonggi, Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force destroyer Suzuki have also made their stop here at Pier 7. Many Korean people working and living in Qingdao came here to welcome the frigate from their motherland. While on the other side at Pier 3, the Russian ambassador to China is expected to welcome the Russian naval vessels, frigate Admiral Gorshkov, tug ship Nikolai Tikhon, and logistics support ship Elbrus. Organizing International Fleet Review is a unique ceremonial activity of navies, showing to the world the participants' firm determination to safeguard peace and seek development with joint efforts. Tambo, CGTN, Qingdao, Shandong Province.
A recap of our top stories now. In Sri Lanka, multiple explosions have killed dozens of people. AFP reports the death toll is now standing at least 185. That number is expected to rise. 3 churches and 3 hotels in and around the capital of Colombo were targeted almost simultaneously. 2 additional churches were also targeted outside the capital. Hundreds have been injured. Some of them are foreigners, including 4 Chinese. Police have blocked off the areas as crews rushed the victims to hospital. No group has claimed responsibility. Officials suspect suicide bombers are behind 2 of the church blasts. The government has declared a curfew. In Libya, General Khalifa Haftar's troops continue their push towards Tripoli. Several airstrikes have hit suburbs of the capital. A heavy explosion was reported on Sunday morning. Residents reported seeing an aircraft circling Tripoli for 10 minutes before the attack. US President Donald Trump spoke over the phone to General Haftar. In a release statement, the US recognized Haftar's role in fighting terrorism and securing Libya's oil resources. The statement bolstered supporters of Haftar's offensive. The international community has been divided over how to handle the intense fighting there, with the UN calling for a ceasefire. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, unidentified gunmen have attacked a hospital treating Ebola patients in the east of the country. The gunmen were fought off by Congolese police. The attack came a day after a doctor working with the World Health Organization was shot dead by militiamen in Butembo City. And in South Sudan, a dozen of internally displaced persons have been relocated back to the country's Jonglei region. Thousands have spent years at a protection of civilian site in the capital, Juba, but now they may have a chance to go home. Well, those are the top stories that we're covering for you. We're now going to a break. We've got all the business news coming up, including South Africa explores scenarios to limit a negative impact from Brexit. And Egyptian officials conclude 5-day mission in Washington and New York.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues for taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In Mali, the government is looking to improve the country's cotton production. The government is looking to build the country's capacity to process cotton.
Around 80% of Malians rely on agriculture to make a living. Cotton is one of the country's main staples. The government gives cotton farmers subsidized fertilizer as well as easier access to credit.
It's helpful because the people who grow cotton get fertilizers. Sometimes we also grow corn in addition to cotton.
Cotton fields such as these act as the first step in the cotton production chain. Raw cotton is exported to factories where it gets processed. Malian President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita stated it was shameful that the country only processed 2% of its own cotton.
I'm committed to processing it here, not exporting it in raw form. It's a real social, cultural, and patrimonial issue. It's a shame that these things are not valued.
The industry faces major challenges. These include the energy cost as well as a lack of trained workers. The country's only cotton processing plant, Comatex, also has to compete against cheaper imported products.
They say it's a big textile market, but it's also a market which is flooded with imported textiles which are cheaper. That seriously disrupts the company's business.
Mali has produced 700,000 tons of cotton in the past 2 seasons and looks to improve its processing capacity. Astatal, CGTN.
As the Brexit saga drags on with a new deadline for October this year, the world waits. The UK is South Africa's largest trading partner within the EU. Like other key partners, South Africa is anxiously awaiting a decision on the UK's exit from Europe. Will it be with or without a deal? The government has been exploring several scenarios to limit any negative impact to South Africa. Trade negotiations are ongoing. However, there will be no definitive answer until Britain decides. CGTN's Sumitra Naidu reports.
South Africa's main exports to the UK are platinum, automotives and fruit, and volumes have been growing steadily over the years. In 2018, exports to the UK reached close to $5 billion. What Britain decides to do in regard to its European exit is critical for South Africa. But it's clear Britain wants to leave, and it might do so without a deal.
If that happens, all external arrangements of the European Union will remain in force as they are until the end of 2020.
But that means that South Africa's trade future with the UK remains in limbo.
If anything like a customs union were to be the final arrangement that Britain has with the European Union, then in fact what would happen is that the economic partnership agreement we have with the European Union would just continue without any real appreciable differences noticeable at our end.
The UK remains South Africa's top export market for wine by value, rising 5% in 2018. Fruit exports to the UK jumped by 15%. Important trade that needs to be secured. Experts believe South Africa shouldn't waste this time waiting.
Countries would be approaching the UK to say this is what we are able to offer, trying to set up some discussions or exploratory talks ahead of a potential Brexit to see whether there aren't opportunities that we could take advantage of. Obviously, the UK is not able to sign any of those agreements until they formally exited, but you can certainly negotiate, and I think that would be critical for South Africa to do that.
South Africa, like every other country that trades with the United Kingdom, will have to renegotiate these deals.
South Africa, though, has a number of challenges that it needs to sort out first before it takes advantage of this opportunity.
We've got to have consistent electricity production. We've got to make sure that labour markets are reasonably stable and that we can improve our mining output and therefore commodity output. While this is an opportunity for South Africa, I think a lot of work has to be done domestically to take advantage of that opportunity.
It's an important election year. South Africans go to the polls in just a few weeks. Europeans will have their vote at the end of May. Britain is still deciding. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, here's another story from South Africa. Africa's luxury fashion market is still tiny compared to the rest of the world. Nonetheless, the market is growing. The International Fashion Fraternity recently turned its focus to the continent with the first Condé Nast luxury conference held in South Africa. CGTN's Julie Sher was there.
Cape Town is considered one of the most beautiful cities in the world with its mesmerizing ocean views and exotic landscape. It provided a perfect fit for the continent's first luxury conference to discuss the future of the African fashion industry.
Luxury in Africa and around the world is completely changing. It's not what it was. It's not just for a few people. It's much more something that you can buy, even if it's a small object, and then later on you gravitate to something else. But it's not necessarily the luxury of the cost of it. I consider the greatest luxury of all is something that's made and touched by human hands.
The luxury sector still provides for a niche market, but the continent is home to a growing middle class who want good-looking, well-finished and bespoke products.
It is more important for us as African creatives, designers of whatever it is, from clothing to accessories to footwear, to create our own luxury and then take it out to the world. You know, creating value in a very sustainable way, in a way that is socially sustainable as well. So it means that the workers are treated fairly, that they get the right wage, that there's no child labor, and, you know, just empowering African women.
The conference looked at ways to grow a new generation of tech-savvy designers and help them build sustainable brands.
The internet has made it possible for individuals to start businesses and thrive. No longer do you need to have big overheads with expensive rentals. You can produce and sell from a very small setting where they incorporate their own individual aesthetics into the garments. So and that then takes these to a higher price point. So I think the stuff that's produced by local designers is becoming more luxurious.
The people we've been exposed to at this conference, whether it's speakers or just delegates coming in for the conference, has been invaluable, you know, because a lot of these people are in very high echelons and you never get to see them in person.
African designers are holding their own in the glamorous world of luxury, and they're attracting international clients through their vibrant and unique designs. Julie Shah, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
An Egyptian delegation of private sector representatives has wrapped up their door-knock mission in Washington and New York. Over 5 days, the delegates met with American administration officials to attract more investment in Egypt. Here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim with the details.
The main aim of the trip is to attract more investments from the United States. Egypt is the highest recipient of U.S. investments in Africa. However, most of it is in the arms, oil and petroleum sectors.
Egypt might have an edge when it comes to products that does not, like organic product. The investors are looking for a lot more than just an environment. They want to make sure the tax laws are followed. They want to make sure if they go for bankruptcy, that the bankruptcy laws are suitable for this investment.
Mehdi Al-Afifi has just returned from New York and Washington's door-knock trip. The Egyptian business delegation was highlighting to their American counterparts the new investment law and incentives for foreign businesses.
The mission right now is focusing on the large companies. I think Egypt could be a very good producer and exporter of technology, applications and things like that. A model to follow is India.
Mehdi Al-Afifi says that the feedback for the meetings were positive and that there will be a follow-up meeting between the Egyptian and business delegations of the United States here in Cairo very soon. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, we are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including South Africa's government plans to improve infrastructure in public schools.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's now return to Sri Lanka, where an 8th bomb blast has been reported in a series of explosions that have killed dozens of people. Over 200 have been killed, with the number expected to rise. 3 churches and 3 hotels in and around the capital of Colombo were targeted almost simultaneously. 2 additional churches were also targeted outside the capital. Hundreds have been injured. Some of them are foreigners, including 4 Chinese. Police have blocked off the areas as emergency crews rush the victims to hospital. No group has claimed responsibility. Officials suspect suicide bombers are behind 2 of the church blasts. The government has declared a curfew. We are now joined by Thiraj Wickramanasinghe, the Executive Director of CRIFM. He brings us the latest from Colombo. Thank you very much for joining us, Thiraj. What is the latest that you have there?
Actually, you have said the correct things. Like there are 8 bomb blasts at the moment. So 6 happens in the morning, all during Easter church mass in 3 churches, and all 3 5-star hotels where they have served Easter breakfast. So those are the 6 places mainly that happens the incident, and there were 2 explosions happen in the afternoon. So altogether there were 8. The numbers are correct, like more than 200 people killed at the moment and more than 420 injured. So it's a really bad situation in Sri Lanka.
As you were saying there, so 6 explosions, 3 earlier, 2 this afternoon. Can you describe for us the scene there in Colombo right now?
So at the moment, the government has published the police curfew, so nobody can go out of their places. So everybody should stay in their homes because they don't want to have any other conflicts between any religious effect or something like that, so they won't remain in calm and until they sort out what's going on there, because nobody knows, nobody take the responsibility for this incident at the moment. So nobody have no idea about what's going on at the moment, so best thing is to keep quiet and just see what's going on, helping the military service to do their job. That's what they are doing at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us. That was Thiraj Wickramanasinghe, their Executive Director of CRIFM. Moving on now to other news. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has committed to accelerating the modernisation of the country's schools. Ramaphosa presided over the opening of 3 high-tech schools in the rural KwaZulu-Natal province. The areas previously only had mud structures built by local communities. CGTN's Yulisa Njamela has more.
From mud huts to smart boards, the mud huts have now been replaced with modern brick and mortar structures with additional design elements. The new schools have multi-purpose classrooms and science labs. They're also equipped with a multimedia center with a fully fitted library and computer center. Touchscreen laptops have been donated to the learners and to teachers at the schools. Ramaphosa says he's confident that the government is on the right path.
Education, as Nelson Mandela said, is the most important weapon that you can use against poverty. And we have seen how it can be utilized. By doing this, we are spreading the seed of real effective education. We are ensuring that the children who come from this area are going to be well educated. Our government is investing a lot of money.
The president says this drive is to ensure that the country produces learned future leaders.
Already here, we are looking at the future scientists that our country is going to have. We are looking at the future lawyers that our country is going to produce. We are looking at the future pilots that our country is going to have. They already show that they are capable, they are articulate, they are clever.
The president says the new model used to build better schools in the country will help in eradicating schools without water, sanitation and electricity. The designs also comply with current and future school requirements and complement the rural environment in which they are situated.
The building of schools forms part of the president's call for collaboration between civil society and government to realize the children's rights to safety and dignity in educational facilities. Yodisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
We have all the sports news coming up for you after the break, including